Lewis asks, what do you make of the new national poll putting Tories and Reform above Labour? And just before you dive in, guys, this comes obviously in a week when Nigel Farage, together with billionaire property developer and Reform treasurer Nick Candy, met Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago, with Musk reportedly considering supporting Reform with a large donation. We've said repeatedly on the podcast, haven't we, that Labour should take this seriously. Long time until the next election, though. Let's start with whether our laws actually permit a large donation from the likes of Elon Musk. George?
So at the moment, electoral law is that donations above 500 have to come from donors registered in the UK, but Elon Musk could channel donations through the UK arm of X.
Can I just say that £500, not £500,000, for any US listeners listening who think that there's much more money in British politics than there actually is.
And Musk's father has said he could claim British citizenship through family links. So now,
it's not going to be difficult if he wanted to do it, basically.
No, exactly. And I think observers have long made the point there are loopholes in British law, and all it takes is one super donor to get involved. And I think people feel there's been a degree of naivety in Westminster as to how easily British money could be British politics could be captured by big money. We still don't have a cap on political donations, so it's also possible for domestic donors to hold huge sway. Certainly, people were aggrieved about Lord Ashcroft's funding to the Conservatives in the past. Now, how worried should people be about reform? I mean, this is a question being discussed obviously at the highest levels of government. Morgan McSweeney's view, Chief of Staff in Number 10, is that Labour don't know who their main opponent will be yet in 2029. Labour MPs, 89 of them have Reform in second place. They're looking nervously over their shoulder. I don't think the threat of Reform should be underestimated. If you were to design an electoral landscape for them, it would look a bit like this one: an unpopular government, an unpopular official opposition, a shrinking economy, huge concern over record immigration. But we also shouldn't forget Nigel Farage's negatives. He's not a popular politician. His approval rating's about -20. His association with Donald Trump, an even more unpopular figure, doesn't necessarily help him. If Trump's presidency goes very badly, he will be tainted by association. And then there is hostility to reform across from Conservatives, Liberal Democrats. They're not this sort of catch-all populist party that will simply appeal to all. But in a volatile landscape, it's very hard to predict just how far they can go, and that's why Labour shouldn't be complacent.
Rachel, Nigel Farage wrote in the Telegraph upon coming home, "I have come home with copious notes of how they increase the turnout, voter registration and so much more. And all of this I intend to implement as part of the professionalisation of our party." You were out with Labour, I know, during the election campaign. Perhaps just talk us through how big a difference this kind of, a big donation from Elon Musk could help reform. What would they do with it?
So it depends on how that money is spent. And actually, I think even more interesting than the donation is the stuff that Nigel Farage has said about voter registration, turnout and all of that, because you sort of need both. So when I was out following canvassers with Labour, the level of organisation and discipline in that operation really impressed and kind of surprised me. So they all had apps on their phone. It was called Contact Creator. I have no idea how much it costs to get a personalised voter registration app like that, but you could imagine that they spent quite a bit of money on that. And these volunteers knew which houses, like which individual addresses on a street to target, which ones had said that they voted Labour in the last election, which ones had said that they were open to voting Labour. Had they been targeted before, they'd knock on a door, they would have a conversation, they would note down on the app, this person seemed warm, they're concerned about these issues, they could do with another call closer to the election, maybe the candidate should go around and talk to them about whatever their pet issue is. All of that goes into the app, and it's a big centralised database that Labour had, which meant that it could target individual voters at a really effective level. And actually, there were some grumbles from Labour volunteers in that they were being directed from Labour HQ, go to this constituency, talk to these people. And they were saying, can we talk to people elsewhere? I was like, no, these are the people you have to talk to. And they were threatened if they didn't do what they were told, that they would have access to this app turned off. So it was really, really centralised and disciplined. And this goes back to Morgan McSweeney's tactics, Starmer's chief of staff, who was campaign director in the election. If you go back to the local council election that he was involved with in Lambeth many years ago, when he sort of first cut his teeth on campaigning, he worked out again, here's the population that we're looking at, here's the number of people who are registered to vote, here are the key people in different wards that we need to convince. I think we can take the whole council if we just convince 6,000 people. Go and convince those 6,000 people. So that's Labour. If you kind of export that onto Reform with a donation of, it's not going to be 100 million if it comes at all, maybe it'll be, I don't know, 20 million, which is still huge. What could they do? They could get that data. You get that data processing service providers, hire a whole load of people to go door knocking and get the information that they need, and run a much more highly organised, centralised, professional operation. So that's one thing that they could use it for. The other thing is obviously ads and social media ads. Labour outspent the Tories vastly in the last election, and one of the things they spent that money on when it came to social media ads were very, very targeted local ads. So all of the Labour candidates, they were chosen, they had videos ready to go. So as soon as the election was called, people in their local area would be shown those videos and those adverts. Now, that's something that, one, you have to pay for, and two, you need the data from the first half to be able to plan and target that effectively. So, yeah, it could really make a difference.
So if we go back to Lewis's question, what do we make of Reform and the Tories ahead of Labour? You've got the popularity of Reform, you've potentially got a huge cash injection. Overall, team, not great for Labour.
Well, I mean, I'd say to Lewis, that poll was one poll.
Yeah.
And I mean, the nature of polls is that the interesting ones get far more coverage. You know, we've had one poll with Reform ahead. We've had many others where Labour's been ahead of both the Tories and Reform. Now, the big picture of British politics, though, is that there's no party which is truly popular in the country. So, you know, sometimes we have hung parliaments. We don't have a hung parliaments at the moment. We have a 170-seat Labour majority, but we have a hung politics. You know, the voters are looking at Labour, they're looking at the Conservatives, they're looking at Reform, and they're not prepared to commit to any of them at the moment. Now, look, we're familiar with governments being unpopular a midterm, although we're only 5 months since the election, so this isn't really isn't really midterm yet. So it's true, Labour's unpopularity has come unusually early. We're not really familiar with a situation, though, in which everyone's unpopular. You know, normally public opinion is sort of thermostatic. Labour go down, Conservatives go up, and vice versa. At the moment, we're not seeing the Conservatives go up, and we're not yet seeing Reform enjoy the kind of surge that, say, the Social Democratic Party had in the 1980s when they were up in the 40s. I think they even came close to 50 at one point. Now, I think if Reform have a genuine poll lead over the Tories and Labour, then you start taking them, you know, genuinely seriously. That's not to say they shouldn't be taken seriously at the moment, but I think people should pause and be a little wary of getting carried away with the hype, because we have very much been here before.
Yeah, and I would add to that what George said about Nigel Farage being not popular. He's very popular among his particular demographic, but overall he's a very divisive figure, and there are more people who would hate for him to be anywhere near politics than there are who think he's sort of the political messiah. And I think what may happen as Reform become a more serious political force is that there is a more serious political force against them. So you could see that as well. People who wouldn't necessarily have voted for Labour or the Lib Dems or even the Conservatives, you know, in their seat because they just hate all of them. If there's the risk of a Reform candidate there, you may see a version of tactical voting like what we saw in the election in July against the Conservatives, but a kind of stop Reform initiative. And we haven't really seen that yet because they haven't been a serious political threat. But the more that they become a serious political threat, the more I think there'll be a backlash as well.